Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Fellow Toastmasters and honored guests, what can you do with 15 minutes? I'm going to ask you just to take a moment just to think about that. 15 minutes. Could you make an impact in the world with just 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Once?
Yeah.
Or what if you took 15 minutes a day? Could you change your life? Maybe change your world? Possibly even change the world with 15 minutes a day? Well, I'm here to see if that's possible. So I'm going to take the privilege you've given me by giving me 1% of your day, which is 15 minutes, and I want to honor that gift you've given me and see if I can give you something that you can walk away with that maybe could change your life or the life of someone around you. Now, if you look at this clock, you might think, that clock, the second hand is moving, but the minute hand has not changed at all. How many of you have heard the phrase, a broken clock is correct 2 times a day? Have you heard that phrase before? Well, let's get this clock started. And to start the clock, to get the minute hand going, it takes some kind of power. In this case, it's as simple as a AA battery. All I have to do is insert it into the back, and our time has begun. Let's see what can happen in the next 15 minutes. Now, I want to teach you something. I want to teach you some magic. You may not have thought of this before as magic, but I believe it's magic. It's the magic of, wait for it, the magic of CPR. Now you might think, well, how in the world is CPR magic? Well, let's look at it this way. Prior to 1970, if someone performed CPR on another individual, it would have been looked upon as magic. In fact, if you go back 200 years, if someone performed CPR on another individual successfully, they probably would have been burned at the stake. So what is CPR? Well, it's a simple 3-letter CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. What does it mean? Cardio is heart, pulmonary lungs, resuscitation is the act of reviving. So really, it's simply a matter of reviving or restarting the heart and lungs. That's all there is to it. Now, you only use this technique in a very specialized situation, when someone's heart and lungs need to be restarted. Now, I have a difficult question for you, and don't feel bad if you don't know the answer. It's okay, people never get this, so I'd be surprised if you got the answer to this. What's the one word we call someone who's not breathing and has no pulse? It's 4 letters long, begins and ends with a D. Brilliant! You people must have been studying for this. Dead. So in reality, we only do this technique on people that are dead. We're trying to bring dead people back to life. That is the magic of CPR. And the beauty of CPR is, if you're working with someone who is already dead, then how badly can you screw it up? You can't hurt them because they're already dead. The worst that's going to happen, they're just going to stay dead. Nothing you do to them will make them double dead. In fact, if you go on your phone right now and check dictionary.com, you will not find the words deader or deadest. No such words. So let me show you real quick CPR. Now understand that this is typically a class that takes a couple hours, and I'm going to show it to you within 15 minutes, and I have something else to show you as well besides CPR. So we're going to make this very quick. The beauty of CPR is it's so simple. There was a genius that said, keep it as simple as possible, but no simpler. And I feel a kin spirit to this individual because his last name is a German name, and it begins with an E and ends with an N, just like my name. But I can tell you that I've never been confused with Mr. Einstein. No one's ever said, that Eddinghausen, that guy's a regular Einstein. But let's keep it real simple. In CPR, you're trying to bring someone dead back to life. There's really no pulse. Now, it used to be in the old days, if you've taken CPR in the past, it was the ABCs of CPR. That's the old way. The new way is the CABs of CPR. We actually start by keeping airway breathing going straight to circulation. Now, how do I check, or where do I check for circulation on this pretend individual here? It's a good thing, John, that you chose the carotid artery in his neck, since he has no other pulses. He's a third of the man he used to be. Now, since you don't have a mannequin, we'll let you check on yourself. You take 2 fingers. By the way, why do we not use a thumb to check a pulse? You might actually feel your own pulse. So with 2 fingers, just start as the atom sample and slide into the groove of the neck. If you want to find the beat, get into the groove. So right there in the groove. Everybody checking that pulse, finding that pulse, got that pulse. Joey's a little concerned. He's going, I'm not finding my pulse. Are you married to a zombie over here? Oh, you found it. Okay, good. You had me worried there for a second. All right. But here on this mannequin, I'm checking for a pulse, and there is no pulse. Well, there's no pulse. What is not working?
Heart.
There's no circulation. The heart's not working. So let's work on the heart. It's a simple matter of taking one hand, center of victim's chest, put the other hand on top, and compressing. Now, the rate that we're going to do this at is 100 beats per minute. We're going to do 30 compressions and 2 breaths, or 2 ventilations, using 2 hands compressing deep. We're going to go fast and deep. You might wonder, well, how deep do you go? As deep as you can. If you start to hear ribs crack, that may be just a little bit deep. You might want to back off on that. But even if you do crack a rib or 2 in CPR, that's actually very common, so don't worry about that. How fast do you go? 100 beats per minute. Well, how do you figure out 100 beats per minute? There's an easy way to do that. There's a song called Staying Alive from the Bee Gees. And that song has 100 beats per minute. So you could sing that song while performing CPR. Now, I'm not good at singing, so I won't sing that song. But there's another song by Queen called Another One Bites the Dust. That also has 100 beats per minute. But again, I'm not good at singing. And in fact, if I tried to sing, it'd be like me trying to do the Balter dance. It just wouldn't look good, wouldn't sound good. But there is a song that I learned as a kid on the bus. And maybe you've all heard the song before. Now, I have to preface it by telling you that I grew up and I went to school at a parochial school. So we had to change the lyrics of the song a little bit. You've heard the song, 99 bottles of beer on the wall? Well, we changed it to 99 bottles of root beer on the wall. But if you sing that song, that's the rate that we're trying to do with CPR. And every 2 bottles we drink, we followed up by chasing it with two shots. I mean, two breaths. Follow your beer with the 2 breaths. So if you can sing that song with me, help me out a little bit. Here we go. 99 bottles of beer on the wall, 99 bottles of beer. You take one down, you pass it around. 98 bottles of beer on the wall, 98 bottles of beer on the wall, 98 bottles of beer. You take one down, you pass it around. 97 bottles of beer on the wall. And that gives us 30 compressions, followed by our chaser, which would be
2
how many breaths?
2.
2 breaths. He's happy to get CPR today. So 30 and 2. Now, if you're drinking root beer, if you go through 10 bottles of root beer, that would be 2 minutes or 5 cycles of CPR. Every time you drink 10 bottles of root beer, you check for a pulse. If there is no pulse, 10 more bottles of root beer. And you keep on doing that till the paramedics arrive. It's a good thing they arrive because by that time you're about ready to pop your bladder after all that root beer you've been drinking. But that is, in a simple way, CPR. It's as easy as that. Check a pulse, there's no pulse. We don't need to check breathing anymore. We just go straight to checking a pulse. You can look for signs of breathing if there's chest movement, and that is CPR. You just learned a life-saving technique in less than 15 minutes. Hopefully you'll never ever use it on someone, because again, they have to be dead, but if you find a dead person, you could use the magic of CPR and bring them back to life. There's another technique you can use, and the person doesn't have to be dead, but it can save their life. It's when somebody is choking. It's a technique that starts with the letter H. Does anybody know what technique we use when people are choking? Starting with the letter H. Heimlich maneuver. Now, you know, I've been teaching CPR for over 30 years. I'm proud to say I've probably taught more people CPR than anyone else in the world. I've actually had over 100,000 students who have come to my class, or 5,000 classes. So over the years, I've heard people pronounce that word differently. I've heard people pronounce it as hemlock. It's probably not the best idea to give a choking victim poison. They're already choking to death, so we don't need to add insult to injury. I've heard people pronounce it as Heineken. Now, when you save the guy, he's probably going to be a new BFF, so you can go share a couple of beers. In our case, we prefer that we drink what kind of beer?
Root beer.
Root beer, of course. But the strangest pronunciation, I had to call this woman on it. I had to say to her, ma'am, if that guy over there is choking to death, why in the world would you jump up and on that poor fellow perform the Heimlich maneuver? That's disgusting. It's Heim with an M. Now, speaking of M, 2 years ago in May, there was an 87-year-old woman having dinner at a retirement home and she started to choke. One of her dinner companions jumped up from the table, ran behind her, and performed the Heimlich maneuver. Now you might think, well, that doesn't sound unusual. Well, the guy who did it was 96 years old, and just so happened to be Dr. Henry Heimlich, the man that introduced that technique to us way back in 1974. Even more amazing, this was the very first time in his life he had the opportunity to use this technique to save somebody. Now that's where our great story takes a turn for the worse. Remember our sweet, dear old 87-year-old great-grandma? She croaked. She didn't make it. No, she survived. Don's going, man, that's a terrible story. Why would you tell us that story? Because Don is 88. Or 89 now? 88? 80, I think. So it's too close to home on that one. No, she did survive. But sadly, guess who did pass away 6 months later? But 6 months after you finally got to use this technique to save somebody's life. Now, Heimlich maneuver, basically someone is choking. Now what you want to do if you see somebody choking, you want to confirm they're choking and make sure that they're okay with you helping them. Are you choking? Can I help you? Because if they're grabbing their throat, the universal choking distress signal, maybe they're just clearing their throat. And if you come up and start to do something to them physically, it's like you're assaulting them. And you don't want an ABC on your record, assault and battery in cuffs. You don't want that. But you can help them out once you get their permission. And it's simple. You just get behind them. In fact, you could perform this technique on yourself. Here's the way to find where to use the technique, how to use it. First off, find your belly button. It's really important that you find where your belly button is. You all have one. Joey isn't finding his. Joey, you're from this planet. There's no pulse, no belly button. I'm starting to worry that you may have married an alien here. Right. So find your belly button, find your belt line. Thumbs of your fist goes right there at the belly button, belt line area. You grab with the other hand. It's an inward, upward thrust. And you do it like you mean it. You make sure you're low. If you're up too high on the xiphoid process, not a good idea. Down low, inward, upward. And how many times do you do it? As many times as it takes until the object pops out. We say basically do it for 5 times. So if you do it 1 or 2 and the object pops out, that's good enough. You don't need to go 3, 4, 5. That is assault at that point. After 5, if they haven't expelled that object, we need to go to phase 2. What feels like a natural thing to do when you see somebody choking? You just want to run up to them and do what?
Pat them on the back.
That's right. So basically, you just got through 5 times punching that poor choking victim in the gut. That didn't seem to help him. So now, 5 times, we're going to beat him on the back. So lean it forward, heel of your hand right between the shoulder blades 5 times. Now, for you, if you're choking, you really can't so much do that on yourself. So you're limited to just the abdominal thrust for self-administered humming. But for another person that's choking, abdominal thrusts and the back blows. Keep that up. Eventually, you're going to knock the object out of them, or you're going to beat them unconscious. If they're unconscious, then we just slide right back into our CPR technique, but you just make one little adjustment. Shut their mouth before you give a breath, just in case an object pops loose. So now, in less than 15 minutes, you've learned 2 life-saving techniques. One you can use on a dead person to bring them back to life. One you can use on a person that's choking to death, and you can also modify it and use it on yourself. But what can you do every day with 15 minutes? You know, you can learn a language simply by taking 15 minutes a day. In fact, there's a well-known program called Babbel. It's a download program that you can get for your iPhone or your Android, and it's a 10-hour program, but it's administered in 5 to 10-minute increments once a day. So with 15 minutes, you can learn 2 languages with that. 15 minutes a day. What else can you do with 15 minutes a day? You could learn a new language. You can also write a book. If you spent 15 minutes writing, let's say you can write, whether it's longhand or on the computer, let's say you can do 30 words a minute. That's not outrageous, is it? 30 words a minute? In 15 minutes, you would have 450 words. You know, a typical page is between 250 and 300 words. So if you do 450 words, by the end of 3 months, you'd have a book. You'd have somewhere around 150 pages just from 15 minutes a day. What else could you do with 15 minutes a day? There's a lot of things you could do. You could learn how to run a marathon. You might think, well, wait a minute, 15 minutes a day, the marathon's going to take longer than that. It will, but you can practice or train for it in 15 minutes a day. To start, eventually you start to add some time to it. And I talked about this a few years ago, that you could start out with 15 minutes a day. And I had an individual that came up to me at the end of my presentation. He said, you know, I'd love to run a marathon, but my knees are ruined. I can't run. And I said to him, you know, you don't have to run. You could walk, starting out with 15 minutes a day. Didn't sound long, the idea. Well, a month or 2 later, I gave the speech again. The same individual came up to me and said, you know, I'd love to do a marathon someday, but I can't run. My knees are ruined from basketball. I said, you don't have to run. You can just walk 15 minutes a day. Still wasn't sold on the idea. 2 months later, I gave this speech, and that same person was there for the 3rd time. And when the speech was over, he came up and said, you know, I don't believe that I can do it, but you believe I can do it. And if you believe I can do it, I believe in you, so I'm going to try it. And he started out with 15 minutes a day. And 6 months later, that individual crossed the LA Marathon finish line and was presented with the finisher's medal. Now, if you think I'm making that story up, I'm not, because the individual is sitting right back there, Mr. John Grant. An interesting thing is that 15 minutes a day started him on a journey, as he's told me and many other people, that started him on a journey to look at his life and what he could do to change his life with other things. He found out a program called Miracle Mornings, which takes 5-minute increments to do different things in the morning, like to meditate, to exercise, to read inspirational things. And then he started to change his life. Lost over 60 pounds, wrote a book, Unstoppable Mindset, all starting out with 15 minutes a day. Now, as you can see, my 15 minutes are up. I have a question for you. What can you do with 15 minutes a day? Can you make a commitment to spend just 15 minutes a day? You know, 15 minutes a day is only 1% of your day. Actually, it's 1/96th of your day. You know, the number 96 reminds me of a song. Maybe you've heard it. 96 bottles of beer on the wall, 96 bottles of beer, you take one down. 95 bottles of beer on the wall. So does anybody want to offer an idea of what they can do with 15 minutes, either in a one-shot deal with just 15 minutes, or something they can do every day starting from this point forward with 15 minutes a day? Anybody volunteer? Anybody brave enough? Yes, Mr. Grant.
Write a speech.
Write a speech. 15 minutes a day would definitely do that. Anyone else? 15 minutes a day. Just 15 minutes. What could you do with 15 minutes? 15 minutes is amazing how long 15 minutes takes. Your first kiss is short, but a while later, the kisses get longer, and before you know it, 15 minutes is no time at all. I've been married for 20 or 30 years. A 15-minute kiss is a long, darn long kiss. And with that, I will leave you with that to ponder. What can you do with 15 minutes a day? Madam Toastmaster.